And welcome to another episode of Experts Speak. I am Michael DeLon. Today, I am talking with Julie Holunga. And Julie, thank you, by the way, for taking some time out and being my guest today.
Great to be in conversation with you, Michael.
It's going to be lots of fun because Julie does something that I'm pretty passionate about. Is she's all about leadership and helping you to, as she says, amplify your influence and your impact through
Yes.
leadership. And I love that on her website somewhere she says something like, lazy leadership has to be done with. And leadership is one of those things that it takes initiative, and sometimes it just gets tiring. And I know you've got a lot to share with us, so I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to ask you, Julie, how in the world, by the way, did you get doing what you're doing today?
Sure. So we used to live in Boston, go Red Sox. And and I was working at a couple of different universities, and the last gig I had there was working at Harvard Business School on an initiative examining women in the workforce. And specifically, this was early 2000s, specifically looking at what wasn't in place to recruit, retain, and advance women into leadership. And I really loved the conversations that I was having, both with the firms and organizations that were hiring our alumni and with the individuals themselves in terms of figuring out what they wanted to do. And oftentimes we were noticing that our alums were graduating, setting the world on fire, earning salaries that were so beyond my nonprofit experience. And then a couple of years down the road, they weren't in the workforce anymore, or they had completely shifted to something totally different. Maybe they were client facing to begin with, and then they just said, you know what, I don't want to be on a plane every other day. I'm out. I'm going to do something different. And I started to notice that those really good days, and we all know those days that we have that are like, oh, that was a great day. I'm exhausted, but I'm fired up.
Yep.
And I started to notice that it was the days where I was advising both our female and our male alumni on their career trajectories. And I use the word advising because I was really telling them. It was really a consultant kind of. I was telling them what to do.
There you go.
And we then moved away from Boston, and a couple of years later, my kids were now in school full time. Kind of fast forward a bit, and I decided that the work I'd been doing I loved, but I wanted to do more of those conversations I just described. So I called my boss one day and I was like, all right, I want to do this. Who should I talk to? What should I do? And she is amazing, but was really amazing in that moment, and said, all right, you're going to call these three people. And we all have those wonderful mentors in life who just
Yep.
like, yes, you would be great at this. And so I went and got certified, my first of many. I have to slow down on that, but I just love learning. So it's constantly, any email that comes in, I'm like, oh, I could do that. I could do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, fast forward, I've now been in practice more than 12 years, almost 13 years now. And I love working with individuals to help them become the great leaders that's within them. I firmly believe that. But then also with organizations to help teams be at their best. So it really happened organically. When I started my practice, I was a collegiate swimmer, so I love working with teams. I love being part of a team. So I knew that would come into practice at some point, but felt the need to start with the individuals. And what I started noticing, especially in the last few years, post-pandemic, or really it started during the pandemic, but even has just accelerated, and I respond to what I'm hearing in the marketplace, is that I saw that I would come and work with these leaders and really help them get out of their own way and
Mm.
help them see where they need to step back because they're maybe contributing to things that aren't working.
Yeah.
So gaining that self-awareness and then having the tools to do something about it, right? So it's a little bit of coaching, it's a little bit of consulting and advising. Sometimes I come in and then work with, all of the managers at that level to upskill them in whatever way that comes up. And then I noticed that here I am, like, really creating these amazing, helping to create these amazing leaders and really be a guide next to them and partner with them to get to that point. So I often think of it as if anyone has a garden, if you're growing a cucumber, let's say, and you plant that seed and you water it and you fertilize it and you take care of it. Hopefully there's some good sun and you make this beautiful cucumber, right? And it's so tasty and delicious and it looks good. But if we put it into a jar of vinegar, it's going to turn into a pickle. And I started noticing this, especially the challenges that have come up in the last few years around disparate teams, or maybe teams that were together physically, and now we don't have a physical space that we gather in. Because now we're all working from home, or we've given up on that, our lease. I hear that a lot of time, or we've gotten a smaller space in some way. And so the teams and cultures were shifting. So I say, like, I'm not describing cultures as vinegar, but if something wasn't exactly right, we have these great leaders going back into situation or teams that weren't operating at their best, and we got to make a change.
Yeah.
So that's a long-winded way of answering how I got to where I am today. But
yeah, no, that's a great story, and I really like the cucumbers and vinegar and pickles thing, because that's so many times so true, and it can happen in a lot of areas. So, for instance, I was in a nonprofit ministry for a number of years, climbed the corporate ladder, right? I was a cucumber. I was growing. I was ripening. Things were good. And then my boss was on the leadership team. He left the ministry. So what'd they do? Well, the natural thing, throw Michael in there. And that was vinegar. And Michael became a pickle because Michael wasn't a leader at that level. And there was not any training. It was just like, well, you're good there. You're going to be good here. It's like, yeah, no,
exactly.
And that's, I'm sure that happens in corporations
all the time,
everywhere.
Every day. And it's, in fact, that example that you just gave is one of the most common that I hear, like, oh, Michael did so well here, or he's so strong technically, whatever the industry is. Let's promote him.
Yeah.
But we don't need to support him or give him the skills or tell him, the thing that I hear all the time is, do I have to have that hard conversation? I don't know how to do it.
That's right.
Like, I don't know how I should talk to this person. Oh, Julie, can you just go do it? Which the answer is always no. But that's like very good intentions. Michael's great. We want to see more of him. Let's put him onto this senior leadership team.
Right.
More often than not, something happens and they're like, well, and someone leaves, they get let go, whatever it might be, because honestly, like, we just threw you into the deep end and we expect you to swim.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then I'm stuck. You're stuck, because if I don't perform, what are you going to do with me? Demote me? Well, that doesn't work. Oh, let me out of the ministry? Well, that really stinks. And so it comes down to leadership, which is what you're all about. So how in situations like that, or even on one-on-one basis, do you help people and organizations really, I guess, develop a leadership mindset and a structure to build people and teams? How do you do that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I do, because I see leadership, it is some skills based, but really, like, you could have the skills, if you don't have the mindset, you only go so far. You'll only be able to impact and influence people just a little bit. So I come in often to do some skill development, typically in a group setting. So it may be all managers, or it may be new leaders. And we want to invest in our new leaders. And I come in, let's say, for 6 months, and it's assessments and skill development and coaching and problem solving. And then it is that leadership mindset, and it becomes more of an owner's mindset.
Right.
So it's not simply, this is what's good for me. Right. It's, let me think about what's the betterment of the team, and how is the team fulfilling and rowing in the same direction as the organization as a whole. So I think most of us come into leadership. There are the exceptions, but most of us come into leadership in some kind of managerial role. We've all heard about that. You and I were talking about, John Maxwell, right? Like going from a manager where you're managing projects typically, and you're reporting back on the state of those projects and the progression. Then you continue to get some experience. Maybe you do get some skill development and coaching, and you become a leader. And then it's really about, how am I leading this group of people to get to reach our goals? But the difference between the good and the great, because it doesn't end there, is then to become what I like to call the orchestrator, right?
Yeah.
So like, think of a symphony conductor, right? They're standing up probably on some kind of stool or something to make them a little bit taller, and in my case, a lot taller. And they are overseeing this great symphony, and they hear and see all the different pieces playing together to create this beautiful sound.
Right.
And they're aware of what's going on, and they are guiding, right? Everyone has their sheet of music in front of them, but they're guiding the pace,
Right.
they're problem solving, and they're connecting to the betterment of as the whole. So it's a little, and that's the future. That's where leadership's going. If you are in a leadership space now, that's good. It's a good place to be, but step it up.
Right.
And that's what I'm seeing. And that's where I'm working with individuals and teams to help them be at that conductor, orchestrator level.
That's great. Because that orchestra, that guy leading the orchestra, the other thing he's doing that we never see is he's giving feedback to the different people. He's encouraging them.
Yes.
And you never see him take that little baton thing and like beat them over the head. He doesn't do that.
Hopefully not. Yeah.
He encourages them. And I learned something a long time ago. I don't know who taught me this, but you lead people, you manage projects.
That's
and
right.
So many times if somebody's been in a project management role, you put them in leadership, they don't make a change. And so they
That's
start
right.
micromanaging people.
That's right.
It doesn't work. And
Yeah.
so helping them develop these skills, these mindsets around what is leadership and how do I get my people to do research, to make decisions, to consult with me so I can help them become better leaders.
Yes.
That's going to grow the whole organization so we make
Exactly.
a big impact. Is that fair?
That's exactly it. Yes. And oftentimes I hear and see that when they go from that management to leader, they're like, well, if I'm not producing, whatever that looks like, typically micromanaging, I don't have any value here. That's the wrong mindset to be in. So I had a leader of a large firm in New York say to me, when you continue to rise up, I mean, this guy, like, his bonus last year was 20 million. So I can't even imagine what his salary was. And I did have the thought, like, I think I need to raise my rates.
That's right.
But anyway, he's telling me this, that, as you go up, it's less about doing and more about motivating others to do.
Yeah.
And I thought, like, that is the best. It's simple, but everyone gets that.
Yeah.
And if you can think about, how am I impacting the entire, whether it's the business section or it's the organization as a whole, and taking on that leadership mindset that is ownership, right? Not just about me as the individual, about my team, about, like I said, the business unit, about the organization as a whole. And how do I represent my team at the high, like you were talking about in that senior leadership team, and externally as well.
Right. Well, and I got this phrase, John Maxwell, years ago, right? His whole thing, leadership is influence.
Yes.
Period. Yeah. I think we need to understand that as leaders, we are to influence people and help them grow, and realize most people are there to grow for a bigger purpose. It's not the paycheck. I mean, money's important, but it's like third or fourth or fifth on the list.
Yes.
If you have a good leadership culture in your organization, you have a good culture in your organization, you're going to attract talent, you're going to retain people, and they're going to produce a lot better results for you, your team, your clients, all of that. It comes back to leadership. And unfortunately, as you know, it's not taught, right? We need people like you to come in to say, okay, so let's talk about that. How does an entrepreneur who's, let's say, a law firm owner, he's got a staff of 5 or 6 people, a couple of attorneys. How do you work with them? Is it a one-on-one? Is it one group? Is it online coaching? I mean, what are some different ways you work with entrepreneurs to help them work this out?
Yeah. So yes to all of that. So typically they come to me. It may be the managing partner. It may be someone on the executive committee. It may be the person who's in charge of professional development. And they come to me because they just notice something's not right. They don't know what the solution is. They don't know what to do, but they know they're not getting the most either out of their individuals or as an organization, like you described, a small law firm as a whole. So typically I start with that leader and we paint that picture. What does success look like? What do you want to see in people? What's the culture you want to create, right? So we know we don't want the jar of vinegar.
Mm-hmm.
What is like the most pure water, spring fed water that you can imagine? What does that look like? And then typically, then I start working with the team as a whole. And we always start with a couple of assessments, because what I have found in particular is if we can have that conversation where we're not pointing the finger,
That helps.
it's amazing. And, we're talking the same language. I give them the language to understand each other. So there's a communications tool, an assessment that we use. And then I also give them, it's really a facilitated discussion on like, what does a high performing, high value team look like? So I call it a CAV team: cohesive, aligned, and added value team. So if you think of it from that perspective, all of a sudden it's not about how much are we producing, because then people get burnt out, doesn't work. But how are we really, that value add, that V in it, it's really the key thing there, that we're rowing in the right direction. We know where we're going. We're sharing information. We're not operating in silos. We trust each other. Okay, so how do we do that? So even if we know how to have a hard conversation, or we know how to deal with conflict, how do we do it for us as an entity?
Right.
And that makes a huge difference, because that's what we were talking about before, right? Like we could have the skill, but if we don't know what it looks like within this organization or team, it doesn't serve us.
And that's why, dare I say, just reading a book or listening to a YouTube video is really not enough. I mean, that's a good start, but you really need somebody like Julie to come alongside and advise you.
Yes.
And tell you what to do and how to do it, and check in with you and your leaders. Yes. And what we found, at least what I found in that ministry I was in, is there was a separation between leadership and the people. Mm-hmm. And what the people talk to the people about is not what the people talk to the leadership about, right?
That's right.
And we needed a Julie to bridge that gap.
That's right.
And I think organizations need that to be good leaders of organizations, right?
That's right. And then what happens is, I always hear this is, oh, life is so much easier.
It's amazing.
Right? I'm not stressed. I'm not ruminating. I'm just going and having the hard conversations. I don't want to do it, but I know how to do it. And I know it's going to be okay. And we're not working in silos anymore. And holy crow, like we're producing so much more, or we're serving so many more people. There is an enormous bottom line impact of the work when you focus on this. I have one client was an attorney. People liked working with him. Some, like no one's perfect. His book, just to give you some set, grew 3 times over in 18 months, simply because he was being more thoughtful.
Yeah.
Right. He had the skills. He was being more thoughtful. So there was this bottom line impact, which was not at all what we described as success, but was a natural byproduct, because he was bringing the right people in to work on different cases. He was sharing information. There was so much more cross-selling that was naturally happening. He said to me, I'm just having so much more fun. Right. And to me, that was like, okay, I'm done. Like, I need to leave now because this is all good. Like,
that's right. Yeah. Yeah. Refer me to all your friends who are not having fun, and we can do lots more work, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Because business should be fun. And when you set up a culture, a leadership style culture where you're really trying to impact others and bring out of them the best in them, you don't have to force them. You don't need a stick. You've got a carrot, and they're going to run for it, because everyone wants to grow. We all want to be cucumbers.
Yes. Yes. Not I mean, I love pickles, but
I do too. But
don't want to be one. Yeah.
I don't want to be one. Exactly.
Yes.
Especially sour pickles. Get rid of those sour pickles. We want good, fresh, juicy cucumbers.
Yes.
Julie, you've shared a ton, and I know you and I could talk a long time because
Yes.
this is just a passion of mine. I know there are so many people out there who are dealing with all kinds of leadership issues, and sometimes this is just very, very confusing, and they need somebody just to talk to walk them through a process. How do people get a hold of you? What's the best? How do they find out about you? Schedule a call. What's that process look like? Where do they go?
Great. So you can go to my website, which is julieholunga.com. I have a ton of resources, over a dozen years of articles that can be helpful in the moment. I have a lot of clients who come to me and say, "Oh, I just read that piece on feedback. It was exactly what I needed." So that there's tons of resources. You can take an assessment, a really quick assessment there that's all about trust within your organization. I founded the trusted voice paradigm, so you can learn more about that and see how you can build trust in your organization. I also suggest, reach out to me on LinkedIn, connect with me. I have a monthly newsletter. My goal is to keep it to about a 4-minute read.
There you go.
Um, so I really try to be practical and to get you thinking a little bit differently. So those are two, free,
Awesome.
all
Love
kinds of
free,
great
love leadership.
resources. Yes,
So I'm going to grab that and put it in the show notes, Julie's
great.
website and her LinkedIn connection, so that you can reach out to her and just start a conversation. Read some articles, but reach out to her and say, okay, maybe we should talk. Here's my situation. She'll DM you back and forth or whatever, but
Right.
build a relationship and see how she can help you really
Yeah.
develop a culture of leadership. Because when you understand leadership and you do it right, it really is it's gonna amplify your business and make life a lot more fun. It's giving you
Mhm.
greater influence and impact. So, Julie, thank you for trudging through the background and everything to get to where you are today, because you're making a difference in people's lives. So thank you for doing that. Thanks for being my guest today on Expert Speak.
Thank you, Michael. It's so fun talking with you.